And then over time, you started to accept the change and maybe things are better now. For some people, it means making a departure altogether. And instead of accepting that change, you're making a different change for yourself and moving in a different direction. So all of these things that we're experiencing, are a normal part of the change process. When we're encountering people who are resisting change, they may be somewhere along this curve, but that doesn't mean that they're stuck in one place. So many times we think when we encounter a person who's offering us resistance, perhaps they're just stubborn or lazy or stuck in their ways. More than likely, we're just watching them going through this part of this process at a point in time. It's not a static or fixed quality about a person. It's a representation of where they are at a certain moment in time. So as we're thinking about that, it changes. Completely normal to have resistance against. It's completely normal to feel that. And as a change agent, it's also extremely frustrating. I just want to if we can get some thumbs up, or do you find resistance to change to be frustrating at all in the work that you're doing? Any reactions to that? Our experience of frustration as a change agent? Am I alone in that? Just curious. Okay. So, yep, I'm seeing some thumbs up coming now. A few other people get frustrated by resistance to change. So I'm going to share with you some ideas that I encountered in a moment of now all the thumbs are coming, rather extreme frustration that I was feeling as an agile coach. Probably it was, I'm sitting at my desk, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, after someone had refused to participate in a daily stand-up for the 1,000th time, and trying to understand, why is it that people are resisting this kind of change? And I encountered this article in Harvard Business Review it was an interview with the psychologist Edgar Schein. He's done some lovely writing and research around this topic he's been, an active psychologist since the 50s, and he just recently passed away. But he had this article that's called The Anxiety of Learning that I highly recommend you check out. And it disturbed me so greatly because it shook my idea of what it was that I was doing as a change agent. So as an agile coach, I'm very enthusiastic about agile ways of working. What this article helped me to realize is that for many people, they've come to a certain way of thinking about, their ideas and beliefs of how things should work in the world and at their job. And as Schein puts it, it's not a particularly joyful process to give up your values and beliefs once you've decided what they are. And so if I'm introducing a transformational kind of change and asking people to change how they think about things, essentially I'm asking them to unlearn or let go of some things that are very important to them. This whole process is what Schein calls learning anxiety. So the idea that in order to learn something new, you have to adopt new behaviors or new attitudes, but there's a risk of losing your position, your self-esteem, or your group membership. So as many of you put, when I asked you what was at stake in a change, there were some pretty serious things there. There were things like your integrity or your job or your sanity. So when we ask people to change, sometimes we're asking them to put something pretty serious on the line. The reason that people will change, Schein says, is if their sense of survival anxiety is greater than that learning anxiety. And survival anxiety is what he says stems from a fear of an important goal not being met or important value being compromised. And so that for that equation to be true, survival anxiety has to be greater than learning anxiety for us to make a change. Learning anxiety produces resistance to change. And we all know that anxiety in general makes it more difficult for us to learn. So there's some inherent paradoxes at play when we're creating change that we have to be really mindful of and careful while we're navigating. Some of the interesting research here that just is like a little bit unsettling that I want to share with you all when we're thinking about this is that for most people, when the change is introduced, you're going to do this math and struggle a little bit with, do I want to do this or not? most people will rationalize whatever pain it is to move through the change and just go along with it. And Shine found that that number is about 80%. So 80% of people, when asked to make some kind of change, will just go along with things. And he connects this to some observations he made in studying prisoner of war camp survivors from the Korean War. And he found that 80% of people there survived the ordeal by being passive. They just went along with whatever they were being asked to do. He says this is the way that it happens in most organizations, which is kind of crazy to think about. What's really interesting, though, is that 80% people are just going to go along with change, and we can see that. There's another 10% on either side of the spectrum. 10% are going to want to go along with the change very enthusiastically. We'll call those collaborators or promoters of the change. And another 10% or so are going to resist the change. And so what's interesting about both of those groups is that they share a similar psychological profile, and that they both feel the need to take some kind of action when they're being asked to change. 80% will do nothing and go along. 20%, 10% on either side will feel the need to do something. And the people who offer resistance are often encouraged by having some kind of audience for that change. They're going to feel a need to do a job, and they need to have other people listening to that in order to be, in order to continue with it from a resistance point of view. So as we're looking at this, I'm going to invite you to consider a metaphor for these jobs that we take on as we're doing change. So in this metaphor, well, let's imagine that we're on a boat towards change, and we have different roles that we're going to play as we navigate the change. So some of us are going to feel compelled to row the boat. We're going to move the change along actively through our energy. About 80% of us are going to just be a passenger. We're just along for the ride. We're just hanging out and letting the change move us. And then there's going to be another group of us who are going to be settled in the status quo, and we're dropping an anchor. Maybe that's visible. Maybe that's a little less visible. And then the other chunk of us are going to be doing something that I like to call keeping the lighthouse. And so these might be people who are being vocal and offering what seems like resistance. It could be resistance. It could also be pointing out to us where there's a potential obstacle along the way that we need to address in order for the change to move forward successfully. So it's possible that within these folks who are dropping an anchor or keeping a lighthouse, that they're telling us about something about the change that we ought to be paying attention to if we want the change to be successful and move forward. Okay, so we're going to play a little game to apply this thinking. I'm going to share some scenarios, and I'm going to ask you to guess who you think might be responding, what kind of job someone is playing for the change using these little categories that I've just shared with you. So in your resources, you should have several handouts that we'll be using today for your exercises. And this first one is a change response matching game. If you'd like, you can go ahead and use this as a little grid to record your answers. You can also pop your responses in the chat if you'd like to share them there. So as we're going through this, just consider which of these change jobs do you think that the person might be doing based on their behavior? So are they rowing the boat and moving the change forward? Are they being a passenger or just along for the ride? Are they anchoring in the status quo, or are they keeping the lighthouse and warning us about something that we might need to address? So there may be multiple right answers. So I will share that up front so we don't get overly twisted about, what the right answer is. There are probably multiple right answers. So I'd love to see a little debate happening in the chat around which it could be. All right, so we're going to get started with this exercise. I'm going to read out the scenario. I'm going to give a little space for you all to respond. So if it's a bit quiet, that's because I'm just waiting for your answers. Okay, first one, scenario one. Team agrees to implement a new process in a meeting with you. 2 weeks later, nothing has been done. So what kind of change job might this team be doing for us? Are they rowing the boat? Are they passengers, anchors, Keeping the lighthouse. What do we see here? Boat, passenger, dropping an anchor. We've got a couple of different ideas here. Yep. Anchor, passenger. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Very good. Thank you. And I'll reveal a set of possible answers at the end. All right, great. We've got more votes now for anchor. Lighthouse. Okay. Anchor, passenger. All right, very good. Okay, scenario 2. People decline meetings for your change effort with a plausible excuse or simply no-show. What could be going on here? What job do you think we're doing? If we're declining meetings, we have reasonable excuses, or we're just not showing up. What job might we be doing here? Anchors. Lighthouse, anchor, lighthouse. So it seems like we're pretty convinced that there's some kind of resistance showing up and not showing up. Excellent. Maybe passenger. That's possible. Yep. Okay. All right. Scenario 3. You announce a change in a meeting. No one asks questions or raises any concerns. What could be going on here? Passenger. What else? Any other thoughts? More passengers. Yep. Going along for the ride. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Great. Okay, passenger, anchor, maybe rower. Okay. All right, scenario 4. One of your peers starts asking probing questions about the change. He points out some areas that will be hard to implement. What job is this person doing? I love this one from the last one. Not paying attention, didn't hear you at all. That is also a possible response. Like, what change? This person could be, all right, so for scenario 4, could be a lighthouse. Yeah, lighthouse. Lighthouse. Yep. Also could be an anchor. That's possible. Maybe a rower. Nice. That's great. Okay. All right, scenario 5. One of your team members schedules a meeting with you. She wants to discuss ways of spreading the change to others in the organization. What job is this person doing? What do we see here? Rower. This person is rowing the boat. They're all in. Let's do more. Excellent. Yep, we're pretty unanimous on this one. This person is rowing the boat. All right, last one. Oh, love the emoji. That's fabulous. All right, last one here. You ask your direct report how the change effort is going. They say they've taken a few steps, but they've had too much work lately to focus on the change. So what response do we see here? What could this be? Rower. What else? Anchor, possible. Passenger, also possible. Anchor, rower. Anchor, passenger. Yeah, some of these are really hard to tell. That's great. Passenger, possible anchor, maybe a lighthouse. Yes, there's a lot of potential answers here. Fabulous. So I'm going to share my response game, which I think based on your responses, I should probably update, because I could be convinced by many of your responses that these could be multiple different behaviors going on. So in the first one, I had, that the team is, you meet with a team and they do nothing. Most likely that's a passenger, but it could be, as many of you shared, other things going on there. They could be resisting by not doing anything, which is a way of being an anchor. They could be rowing it along, and that they just are unaware. They're not paying attention. They're unaware of what they need to be doing. So that can come back to communication, of course. Number 2, people declining your meetings or not showing up. Those could be anchors. They could be passengers. Number 3, you're announcing the meeting and no one says anything. No one asks any questions. Those could be most likely a passenger or an anchor, because we have that passivity, but there could be some other responses that, might show up a little bit later. Passive resistance is a thing, AP. I completely agree with you, and that is the way that most people just wait things out, and so that is absolutely a thing, and it's probably the safest thing to do in most organizations, is just to go slowly. All right, back to our answers. So number 4, people asking probing questions. We were pretty convinced here as a group this is someone who is keeping a lighthouse. More than likely that is the case. It could also be just kind of a little bit of a feisty person who is dropping an anchor in the status quo, but it may also just be somebody pointing out, like, we're going to need to adjust these things in order to move forward. The rower, number 5, I think we're probably the most aligned on that one. The person who's asking how to spread the change to other parts of the organization. And then the last one, we had a blend of responses. I think you could definitely give answers around any of those change jobs. The direct report sharing, they've taken a few steps, but they're having trouble moving forward. That could be telling us something about the system. That could be a lighthouse moment. It's some passivity there, so it could be a passenger or an anchor, or it's possible, that they do intend to move forward, and it's just simply a matter of timing. So there's a lot of nuance. We can't tell just simply by someone's behavior what is going on internally. And so we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into some other techniques to demystify that, instead of just making up stories about why people are behaving in the way that they are. Before we do that, though, I just want to ask you all, if you know this to be true about yourself, if there's a change role that you tend to take on most frequently, or if you find that it's really dependent on the type of change. If you want to pop your answer in the chat. If we've got any people who tend to row the boat, we've got some passengers who just wait things out, anybody who likes the status quo and defends that by dropping an anchor, or do we have any lighthouse keepers in that group? A rower. Yes. Lighthouse. Passenger. Rower. Lighthouse. A rower and a lighthouse. See, this is really interesting, because that's the same psychological profile of feeling the need to take some kind of action. Yep. Lighthouse, rower. Very often, people who identify themselves as change agents are going to find themselves on either that rower or the lighthouse side of the equation. Love this. 100% depends on the sanity of the change initiator. Yeah, tend to be a lighthouse or a passenger, depending on the topic. If you are a rower, you have to have some lighthouse. Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, follow-up question on that. Which of those change jobs do you tend to find most frustrating when you encounter them in other people? Is there something that you find triggering when people offer to pick up a certain job with respect to a change? See, I am a lighthouse. Yeah. Remember the joke punchline? Yes, maybe you're referencing AP from, there's a lovely little anecdote in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where he gives a story about naval exercises and a battleship and a lighthouse. And the lighthouse, that's where this comes from, is the idea of that lighthouse. Okay, anchors are what people find the most frustrating. That's what we're seeing so far. Yeah. Anchor, holding on to the status quo. That can be really aggravating, especially if you find yourself to be like more of an active, like let's row the change along, and you've got someone who has plopped an anchor and it's just drag on the change. Yeah. Ooh, anchor or a rower who may not think ahead towards the obstacles. That's interesting. Yeah, that's great. Anchor, passenger. Yep, people just along for the ride. Yeah, so this is good. Like kind of just knowing what you tend to be frustrated by is a really important part in managing resistance to change more effectively. Just noticing, I'm perceiving that this person is dragging an anchor and I am getting frustrated by that. Just that moment of self-awareness and reflection can be very helpful in building on the next step, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. Oh, I've got one more. I'm just going to read. Let's see. The faux passenger who agrees but then doesn't frustrates more than an active anchor who's just opposed to change. I like the nuance there, and I can think of a couple examples of people that I've encountered who could qualify as a faux passenger. Head nodders. That's great. Okay. All right, so we're going to get a little bit deeper into understanding what's going on with people and how they respond to change. And so as we do that, I'm going to share with you this really interesting neuroscience model called the SCARF model. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but I think it's useful to have this as just a concept. And if you're interested, I've got a link in the slides or reference to the white paper that you might find intriguing if you want to take a look at this a little bit more. But we get the SCARF model from David Rock of the Neuro Leadership Institute. And what he's done is taken a couple decades of neuroscience research and collapsed that into a model for us to understand a little bit better about why people are inclined to approach or avoid new situations. And David Rock tells us that this is largely due to the threats and the rewards that we perceive along 5 dimensions. So these 5 dimensions are status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And so if we perceive a threat or reward around one of these, we may be, if it's a reward, we're likely to move toward the change. If it's a threat, we're likely to resist or avoid the change. So here's just a little commonplace example to give you. Let's think about like learning a new piece of technology, for instance. If you're the type of person who feels like part of your status in terms of your career is about staying on top of cutting edge technology, learning something new would be a reward to your status. By contrast, if you're the type of person who's like, I'm an established expert in this one kind of technology, I have deep expertise here, learning something new in a technology that you're not familiar with, where all of a sudden you become a novice, starts to feel threatening, and you may resist doing that. So the stimulus itself is a little bit irrelevant. It's all in how the person is perceiving their threats or rewards with relationship to the thing that is new. And so if we think about this can help us develop a little bit greater empathy and understanding for where that person is coming from and why they might be inclined to approach the new situation, row the boat with us, or if they're going to be resisting it, dropping an anchor, or they're telling us, as a lighthouse keeper about something that may be threatening to them or to others in choosing to adopt the change. So we're going to do a little exercise here with a version of some empathy mapping. You should have in your handouts a blank empathy map, and I'll show that in just a second. But we're going to work through kind of this thinking about like observing behavior and what are we noticing when we're encountering resistance. And so the key here is that we're considering the other person's point of view and using what we observe in a neutral, non-judgmental kind of way to start to form a picture about what might be going on for that person. So we're going to look at, what is the behavior we're noticing? What's the language we're noticing? What other nonverbal cues are present in someone's body language or tone or energy? And then the last piece here is really considering, why might a reasonable person act this way? And so that all kind of categorized under this idea of empathic inferences. So why might somebody be doing this or be offering resistance? So we're going to use an example. We're going to work through this worksheet together. So this should be in your resources folder. And you can jot down some ideas if you like. As I'm going to read through a hypothetical example using, well, it's sort of hypothetical. It's drawn from real life, but the names have been changed. It's a person that I worked with in a coaching engagement several years ago. And we're going to call him Bill. And I'm going to share a little bit about Bill's experience. As I do that, I'd love for you to just kind of jot down what you're noticing about Bill's behavior, his language, the nonverbal cues that I'm telling you about. And then we're going to do a little brainstorming as a group to see what could be going on. Might we infer from what we're observing about Bill's experience and his thoughts about the change? Okay, so I'm going to introduce you to Bill. Bill is an IT business analyst. He's got 30 years of experience. He's a deep subject matter expert in his product. And very recently, he's been told that his department is going through an agile transformation. And lucky Bill has been assigned as the product owner of 3 agile teams a month ago. And this is where I am encountering him as a coach. So I'm noticing Bill in some meetings. I'm just going to share with you my observations. Go ahead and jot them down if you like. So first of all, Bill is showing up late for meetings. He's saying that he's double booked, or he's just declining invites, or not really showing up. When he's at the meeting, he tends to be working on his laptop, heads down, not engaged in the conversation. He has to often be asked by name a couple of times to get his attention to participate. He's saying things, and when he is talking, he's saying things like, I'm working on 3 projects right now, or I'm triple booked, or he might be saying, this is urgent. He's saying things like, you'll have to talk to my manager if you want me to participate in this conversation. I'm working on a deadline. Nonverbal cues. So he's hunched over the laptop. He's got a terse tone. He looks stressed. He looks irritated. Okay, so he's not making eye contact. He's not smiling. So these are some things that we've observed about Bill. And now I'd like us as a group to consider, what might Bill be thinking? What do you think's going on with Bill? What are his thoughts? Why would a reasonable person show up or not show up to a meeting and behave this way? What ideas do we have? Love to see them in the chat. If you've got any ideas there? Bad day, checked out. Manager should have queried department to see if there's somebody who actually wanted to be the agile guy. Yeah, he's an anchor. Overworked, stressed. Not seeing what's in it for him. Not interested in new assignment. 30-year IT people hate agile. Threat to status. What it knows best is changing, or is really over capacity. Insecure, disengaged, not motivated, clearly. Threatened by change, fears he's out of his depth. Overwhelmed. Careful, I am a 30-year IT person. I love agile. I'm so glad to have this debate going on right here in the chat, because it's true. We can't make assumptions. We can try to make empathic inferences. So FC's telling us that was me 15 years ago. Capacity. Okay. It depends on if it was dumped on him, if he didn't ask for it. If he did and he didn't do enough work to make room for us, then he's shunning the new role. He thinks he isn't good enough. Yeah, I love the nuance in these reflections here. So, and I'm seeing too, like different things that we see as potential threats. So I'll just share with you some of the things that I've jotted down. Immediate thought, Bill's being an anchor, but he may also be overwhelmed, frustrated, and overallocated. Yeah, body language is completely closed, doesn't know how to change. Yeah, so like if we take this from, how would Bill talk about this situation to his friends or, other people that he trusts? What are things that he would say? He'd probably say, I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed, I've got all of these deadlines, I'm not really being supported, and I'm being asked to do this change. No wonder he would act like that. If you were feeling like you had all of these deliverables and all these deadlines piled on top of your head, and then you're asked to work in a more collaborative way that requires a lot more of your time, of course you would have a reaction to that would not be positive. It makes a lot more sense. So this is interesting. If Agile were better, perhaps he would respond better. Yeah, so there's something about the change that's being offered that isn't serving a purpose. And as many of you shared in the beginning when I asked you to reflect on a change you were asked to make, you were asking questions. Why are we doing this? What makes sense about this? Was there any research that's done? And those might be some very relevant and real questions that are going through Bill's head.